Please don't use that as a cold open.
I'm recording everything.
I want to get into this. I'm properly excited.
Right.
This is our time to tell our story.
Defend our own honour.
Once upon a time. Actually, no, for us, it should really be a long time ago in a Bristol far, far away. Follow up.
I mean, that's how we start every single episode of Spinnerproof, so yeah.
Without fail. I feel like I've made a rod for my own back by pointing out my corrections, but these are, again, corrections that I want to make. So 2 major corrections from last time. Number 1, I referred to Clause 2 as a grand finalist. Technically, it was and wasn't, I'm going to say. So it was in the episode titled Grand Final. And could, maybe should, have won the Rumble it was in. Close ending. Surprise, surprise. Didn't quite make it through. So what I've done there is the equivalent of calling Expulsion a Robot Wars Grand Finalist. Which I've just realised you're not going to make the link with.
Nope.
That's like calling everyone that was in the 10-way Rumble in Series 10 Grand Finalists. That's what I've done there. So I was incorrect, and I apologise profusely because the whole Salary Clan of bots, I just seem to always get things wrong about.
Should be ashamed of yourself.
The good news is I have very low standards. It's very hard to not live up to them. And yet somehow I manage it. The second correction I want to make is the apprentice I've learned wasn't having belt tension issues. It was some quite big sort of internal issues that I don't know enough about brushless motors to understand. What I do know is they got it fixed for their Rumble.
Cool.
I'd love to give you more information on that, but I am but a fool who doesn't understand things.
Brushless motors are dark magic that neither of us understand, so I think we can leave it at that.
You just put electricity in and fun things happen.
Exactly. It's just, electrons go in, positrons come out, and magic happens. Positrons do not come out, by the way.
It sounded so physicsy, I decided to just shut down. Have you got any stuff from last episode?
Right, so last episode, we made reference to the fact that we failed to talk about Sore Loser in Series 1. And Alex has tweeted us saying that we still haven't talked about Sore Loser from Series 1. And I know, I'm sorry. In our defense,
I mean, that's not technically true.
Oh, yeah, in our defense, we did try, but it was in the episode that we had to record twice. And in order to make the second attempt at recording it less awkward for us, we had to sort of reorder what we were talking about and change some of the topics, because otherwise it would have been a bit awkward for everyone involved. And I don't know if it's... I feel like I've made it worse by explaining this, but yeah, we tried, we failed. We will try again one day. Maybe, probably. Don't hold us to it.
Don't hold us to any promises.
I mean, we promised that we'd finish Retuncti and we still haven't, so...
I mean, I feel doubly bad because I'm not sure that we really... I feel like we maybe did episode 3 a bit of a disservice in our coverage of it. I think our minds were perhaps a little bit on our episode already. It's a strange episode to talk about, though, because in some senses it's the best of the series so far. The field for episode 3 is incredibly varied and incredibly balanced.
This is the current series, episode 3, just to clarify.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Good thinking. I mean, if you look back at the Reddit votes, the predictions for the first round, everything was pretty well split. Probably the best split it's been this series so far. Because everything was so hard to call, and that makes it a really exciting episode to go into. At the same time, there were some fights that were not necessarily shorter, but where the action was all loaded on the front end and they kind of petered out a little bit. And I think that was what we found quite hard to talk through.
Mm.
So it's an excellent episode, but also an episode that just leaves you wanting that little bit more in the fights. But Alex has promised more aggression, and we should all look forward to that. We're going to hold him to his promises. He can't hold us to ours.
Oh, yeah, that's the correct way round.
Follow up, followed up?
Yeah, I see you've written something about YouTube in the docs as well. What's that about?
Yes, so if all goes to plan, this episode, and this episode alone, will be mirrored onto YouTube. We figure that because Bugglebots is a YouTube thing, it makes sense for us to put this one there where it's a bit more accessible to more of the sort of Bugglebots audience. So
I would like to clarify here that I am bowing to pressure from Ryan. This is
one of many
doing.
things. This is one of so many things in the podcast where I have an idea and Sam then puts the work in.
Yeah, Ryan's like, we must put this on YouTube. It'll make sense because of Bugglebots, and it'll be nice to have it all on there. Yada, yada, yada. And yet I'm the one that has to make the video and then spend the hours uploading it to YouTube, and it's a nightmare.
This is the advantage of having a terrible laptop that can't do this stuff. It's so easy to make you do it. But no, please do show your appreciation to Sam for putting the extra effort in. I've done nothing.
No, Ryan makes the titles and the descriptions and the thumbnails. I upload it to YouTube and then forget about it.
If you are on this YouTube video and you have not listened to us before, welcome. Thank you. If you want to hear more of it, you're not going to hear it here. You're going to have to find us on your podcast player. Because we are committed to making this podcast as inaccessible as possible.
No, Spinnerproof is a podcast. It is not an audio show on YouTube. It is a podcast. And that means there is an RSS feed, and that feed links to MP3s, and then you have a podcast app on your phone or on your computer, and it downloads them, and you listen to them without having to watch a video as well. I will never understand this.
Sam is the easiest bear in the world to poke. It's brilliant. Yeah. Ways to listen to Spinnerproof through the website, spinnerproof.com, through your podcast player. We're purists, and we will stay that way.
Dear. If you don't know what podcast player to use, if you're on Android, I would recommend Pocket Casts. And if you're on an iPhone, I would recommend either Pocket Casts or Overcast.
Are they both free?
I am not familiar with the business model of Pocket Casts. Last time I used it, it was like a £5 app. I think it might be free now. I'm not sure. They got like bought by a big company, and that normally results in the app being free. And Overcast is free with like an optional subscription to remove ads. But the ads in Overcast are like really minimal and stuff. Like it's a great app. You should use that if you've got an iPhone.
Fantastic. And we should move on before that retention graph drops off anymore. Heat 4, the greatest heat in the history of heats. Oh, maybe ever.
Oh, no.
Suffice to say, we've been waiting a long time for this.
Have to wait a little bit longer before you can talk about us. I mean, I know you're going to try anyway in every other fight and heat. We're going to keep trying to talk about us, but we should start with Daedalus versus Claws 2.
Whew, what an opener. Two robots, which I'm sure neither team will mind me saying, come from two very different schools of thought when it comes to robot building. With Claws 2, the beauty is in the simplicity, and with Daedalus, the beauty is in the details.
Daedalus is I think Daedalus is a wonderfully simple robot as well. I think using the hub motor is kind of a stroke of genius in reducing complexity there. I think mechanically it's got basically nothing going on. All of the mechanics are in the pre-built motors. Well, apart from obviously like there's a bit of fanciness with mounting the weapon at the front, but other than that, it's a very simple robot, I'm sure.
It's a reduction in mechanical complexity, but a massive, massive increase in the complexity of building it.
Yeah.
Cosmin has a sort of great wealth of information on his Facebook page. We'll link to some of it in the show notes, where he goes through exactly how this works. And he has put an incredible amount of time into getting this right. He's not the only person doing a hub motor on a spinner, but he's the only person who has made it bulletproof. I'll say this time and time again. As far as I'm aware, coming into Bugglebots, that bar had never been stopped. It just works and keeps on working. You go into a fight with any other spinner and you feel like if you can tank 4 or 5 hits, it's going to stop. With Daedalus, you don't have that luxury. You have got to find another way to beat it.
Yeah.
The only weaknesses it's really shown in past events have been wheels coming off, because it likes to cannonball around the arena, and the pit.
I think the cannonballing is a like with a lot of spinners. I think is a problem for Daedalus. I don't know what you could do without sort of like removing some of the magic, but you sort of think if it were a little bit slower and a little bit more controllable, maybe. But It is still a spectacular robot.
It's hard to know whether the speed of it is an advantage or a disadvantage. Cosmin is a very good driver. He can handle the speed of that machine. I think the bigger issue it has is all the gyro when it gets off axis.
Yeah.
And he's done things to try and combat that. Was he running magnets for this? I believe he was running magnets for this.
Yeah.
Which kind of helped get it planted again. But the only other thing you can do is not have a ridiculous weapon, and where's the fun in that?
Yes. Where would be the fun?
Clause 2, of course, the grand finalist from last time. A genuine standout performer from Series 1 through its consistency as much as anything else, and it's such an easy robot to underestimate. Especially from that design standpoint, because it is very simply put together. It's a simple concept, but it's designed and executed very well, and then the driving on top of that makes it a big danger for anyone. There are a lot of opponents you would put Daedalus against, and you'd think it was kind of a foregone conclusion, but Clause 2 had a chance here.
Yeah, I think if you can keep... Well, I mean, Felicity does a very good job of keeping the wedge pointed at the opponent in general, and if she'd managed to keep doing it in this fight, I think Daedalus would have had to work pretty hard to do it, to win.
There's a small detail, by the way, that I absolutely love about all of Clause 2's fights, and that is that Chris, the dad, for people who don't follow names, stands right back. I hadn't noticed this before until I watched it this time. He knows that Felicity doesn't need him there. She's a proven driver. She can deal with it on her own, and she probably doesn't need or likely even want someone stood over her shoulder, and he very clearly respects that, gets out of the way. We all know that he puts a huge amount of work into all of the team's robots. There's too many of them for me to name. And the fact that he's so willing to move out of the limelight and let everybody else shine is just beautiful. And I just have mad respect for Chris on every level. Which is why I feel so bad for the fact I'm constantly getting things wrong about his robots.
See, the trick here is to not follow the sport very much and then not really know who anyone is, and then you don't have this kind of problem.
My problem is that I try to know what I'm talking about. What I would really like to know is how on earth a battery gets removed like that. What kind of witchcraft made that happen?
Oh, who knows? I mean, that was such a huge hit from Daedalus, like straight onto the side of the robot as well, because that was a combination of the weapon getting an almost perfect hit, and also just the momentum of Daedalus itself, because that was a fast attack from across the arena, just straight line into the side of Clause 2. It was kind of incredible.
It was big engagement on that hit.
Yeah. No messing around at all, and yeah, I guess the battery just stayed where it was, and the rest of the robot went somewhere else and yanked the connector out.
It's just the fact that the robot's in one corner and the battery is in the other. It just doesn't. I can't compute it. This is at least a situation where Clause 2's simplicity becomes a strength out of the arena. Imagine if we took damage like that. The hours it would take to repair it just because our robot is stupidly designed. You could see immediately Chris sat down with that robot, looked at the damage and went, yeah, I can fix that. Because it's actually a well-designed machine.
Yeah, I mean, if we got torn in two, I think that would end the tournament for us pretty much. It would be, well, we'd be able to get something driving again, but like, I mean, the repair job on Clause 2 after this fight was incredible. To get it
back. It was as good as new.
Yeah, to get it back. I wouldn't. I'm not going to go so far as to say it was as good as new, but it was incredible, regardless.
It looked as good as new.
Yeah, I think
whether internally it was ever quite the same, I don't know.
I think internally it suffered, but yeah, it was certainly back to fighting strength.
Shout out as well to Sam Price from Maximum Overdrive for being immediately on the scene. I think he was involved in helping quite a lot of people with sort of repairs and troubleshooting across the weekend. In fact, there were quite a few people you could probably name who we regularly saw really getting involved and helping people out when they'd had a bad time in the arena. And Sam is just one of them. We've spoken so often in this sort of vague way about the strength of the community and how everyone helps each other out. And we've always done that, really just trusting that it happens. And we got to see so much of that while we were at Bugglebots.
Yeah.
Any more to say on that fight?
Don't think so, no.
Have we effused enough about other people's robots that we get to talk about our own now?
Oh dear. It's us. It's Thunderchild versus Hello There.
Where do you even begin?
Well, I would just like to, before we get into too much of this, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to the people editing Bugglebots. I have no complaints about the way I've come across on camera at any point. I'm aware that I said some stupid things at a few points, or at least I think they were stupid. Either the editors agreed that they were stupid and cut it, or cut it because it was boring. In any case, it's all been cut. I feel like I've come across well, and thank you so much. I was so worried about that.
I feel like, in general, we got so much more screen time than our robot deserved.
Oh dear. And then on the topic of thanking people as well, like we got a lot of support and like nice things said about our robot while we were there, and then everyone in like the chat when it was on YouTube and the comments and tweets and stuff like that. Everyone's just been really, really nice and friendly and welcoming, and I don't feel like we deserve all of it, but thank you so much. It means a lot.
I have one complaint about the audience, and that is that so far that I've seen, only one person has noticed the best thing about our robot, and that is the 0 turning circle.
The greatest strength.
We had a lot of fun filling out the strengths and weaknesses form. I spent ages trying to write something serious, and then you just blurted that out and it went in, and I am so glad it did. Pure Series 1.
Well, we've got a Series 1 level, well, maybe not even quite that level robot.
Get on to that.
Oh dear.
But no, I mean, anyone that watched our pre-event videos will know the expectations we went in with. We didn't expect much, but we did want to show that the robot was reasonably well built, and we had a couple of ways that we didn't really want to lose. So we didn't want to lose because the link came out, we didn't want to lose because we drove ourselves down the pit, and we didn't want to lose because the hammer wasn't powerful enough to self-right. And none of those things happened.
No. We succeeded on all counts.
How did you feel about the draw with Thunderchild?
Right, so I have a confession to make. I had, at the time, no idea who Nate was.
By at the time, presumably you mean when we arrived, not when the draw came out, because we had been sat on the same table as him for about 2 hours by that point.
Right, so I knew he was insofar as I could, put a name to the face, but that was about it. It wasn't until after the fight that people were like, oh, Nate's like a really great driver and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. Which he is. I don't know, like on the one hand, I was quite glad that we got a draw against a wedgie robot, because it would, mean that we weren't going to get completely eviscerated in our first fight. But on the other hand, I was quite sad to get a wedgie robot, because it meant we wouldn't get completely eviscerated in our first fight. So
That's exactly the dilemma I had at the time as well.
Yeah, it was sort of like, we wanted, we wanted to put on an exciting show, and I think at the time we felt that the most likely way to achieve that was against a spinner of some description, because we have no problem with our robot just being destroyed particularly. So I was a bit nervous about it, but I think that we did put on an exciting show against Thunderchild. I'm actually quite pleased with this as a first fight in general. I think everything went kind of well for us, really.
I'm ecstatic with how this fight had come out. I remember it being really good, but I'm also very well aware of the fallibility of my memory. And I've been very worried that the memory I had of it was this sort of romanticised version where everything was brilliant. And actually it was really boring and no one liked the fight because it was no spinners. Which it seems wasn't the case. It was also a fight that let us use split decision, which was fun for the live audience, but might as well not have been there in the edit because I couldn't get anywhere near the action.
That's so funny. I loved the cutaway at some point. I think it was like to you and Tim just crying with laughter about that.
Yes! Oh, I'm so glad you noticed that.
Oh, dear.
This fight in general was a bit of a free hit. No one expected us to win, but if we had done it, oh boy, that would have been huge. And even just having 5 seconds at the beginning where we were kind of in control almost feels like winning.
Well, see, right. Thunderchild won. There's no doubt that he that Nate completely outdrove me and stuff. But I think that we did better than just the first 5 seconds. Like I think we gave him more of a run for his money than just the first 5 seconds. I think, our forks were effective at interfering with his plans. At the beginning of the fight, at least, like the first, minute and a half or so, well, maybe the first minute or so, there was, enough power in the drive to actually shove him around a bit and stuff. Like it wasn't, I don't feel like we were completely dominated in that fight.
Not at all. I think he took more and more control as the fight went on.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And I think there are 2 reasons for that. One is that we did have an issue where our drive would slowly die throughout the fight. We didn't realise this until long afterwards. The issue was that we had bought the wrong size drive belts. And they were too tight, and it was putting a lot of stress on the motors. So we started off really quick and really pushy. I was amazed, by the way, that we don't look that slow compared to Thunderchild. We've got some nip to us that I didn't appreciate until I saw on camera. So we had that ability to push. The forks, as forks, did their job. And you're driving, all credit to you. Taking advantage of those opportunities in the beginning specifically to land a bunch of hits. I reckon if you went through Series 1 and counted all the successful hammer swings of all the hammer robots that are in that series, we probably matched it in one fight.
Excellent.
And that really was the design intent of the robot. It's not powerful, but it is, I was going to say persistent. Maybe not persistent, but it is going to hit again and again and score points. And if we took this to the judges, which we were a very long way from doing, a minute is a very long time. If we took it to the judges, that would have counted for something.
Yeah.
But Nate does not let you get to the judges. Nate is an excellent driver who is completely at one with his robot.
Yeah.
He's had that thing for years. He's optimised it. He's optimised the way he uses it. And that's the second thing that I think really shows in this fight, is that even though there are times where he is on the back foot, even though the fight isn't going how he might have expected, he is completely cool, completely calm, completely focused. He stood there with that transmitter, leaning in and focusing. We're stood there laughing.
Well, I mean, he's there to win in a way that we just weren't.
We just couldn't believe that it was going so well. We were caught in a moment, whereas Nate is all business, thinking about the long game. And if for no other reason he deserved it on that, there's also then the fact he's a better driver with a better robot.
Yeah, there's lots against us here.
I suppose we should talk about the forks.
Oh, God, those forks. Oh, bane of our existence, those things.
For what it's worth, I was surprised to see how we got stuck. I assumed that we were in the seam around the pit, and apparently there are holes in the pit that I didn't even realise were there, and that's what we got in.
Yeah, and it wasn't even that the fork sort of fell into it or anything. I think we were like already propped up on it because unlike Nate's forks, ours don't have like stops to limit their movement. They just sort of flop around any way they please, really. And I think we basically got stuck up on a fork, so it was pointed pretty much straight down, and then pushed over the hole and then just fell in. And that, we didn't stand a chance of getting out of that with the robot as it was, which was frustrating.
What's funny is that we'd made adaptations to the forks minutes before we went into the arena because you realised that they could flip back and jam in the wheels.
Yeah.
So this already ugly setup got even uglier as we quickly drove a bolt through above to stop that from happening. But we didn't do anything to stop them going under, which we knew they could do, and we just didn't do anything about it. And this is why it's been so interesting to go through that whole season of Bugglebots talking about the floor, saying time and time again that if you get stuck on the floor, that is kind of on you. And we've not been able to talk about this moment as part of it. So I now finally get to say this. Us getting stuck was our fault. There's an element of luck to it happening, but we designed a robot that could get stuck, and that is on us. It was avoidable, and we didn't avoid it. And to make matters even worse, we never fixed the problem and did exactly the same thing in our next tournament.
Oh, that was so frustrating. That was... Because we couldn't talk about, right, when we were talking about Yui and stuff, like, not Yui, the Euros and stuff, like, we couldn't talk about this then either. It was so frustrating to be stuck on the pit again.
We couldn't talk about it for fear of spoilers. But the director of Bugglebots is stood next to the arena screaming, "Not again!"
Yeah. Oh dear.
You and the pit, man. Okay, you ended up down it, but you have got some mad pit avoidance skills.
I tried so hard to not go down the pit. I was like determined for it not to happen.
I suppose really we should be more impressed that Split Decision didn't go down the pit. Avoiding the pit is the only time it drove straight in the whole fight.
Unbelievable to me that you didn't get that in the pit.
It was fun getting Split Decision in the arena, but Split Decision was useless, let's be honest. Split Decision does not drive at the best of times. Put it on a slick steel floor, and it is just... There is no relationship between what I'm doing and what it's doing.
Oh my goodness me. Lessons learned for next time, I think. Slightly more useful mini-bot, maybe.
I mean, we tried that for Marlowe, and how did that go?
Slightly more useful and, or I guess, more visually amusing.
I think Split Decision was a crowd pleaser live. We got some good feedback about Split Decision, just sitting there, spinning around with its googly eyes and insanely bright light. On camera, where it's actually focusing on the real action, Split Decision was nothing.
Oh, so funny.
I was delighted to hear the crowd reaction again. Especially at the beginning, when we get to the side and get a few hits. Crowds love hammers. It completely vindicates the decision to build a hammer.
Mm.
Even if the blows are doing nothing, they're a crowd pleaser.
They're doing everything. That axe has more power than people can comprehend.
Technically true. Oh, there's one thing I've forgotten to mention.
And what's that?
The pit button.
The pit button. Your one achievement has been taken from you.
At the time, in the fight, I didn't think I'd hit it. I was gradually persuaded by people who had watched the fight that I had hit it. It is another memory that I've come to cherish, and it's been ripped from me.
Oh, dear.
No, fair play to Nate. He wanted the sort of big finish. He didn't want us left there. He wanted us to at least go down the pit, and I think he also knew that even if we got away, as soon as the pit was open, he was going to dominate.
Yeah.
In general, I think Nate just showed us great respect through the whole process of the fight. He took us seriously as an opponent in the pits. As soon as he saw who he had that setup changed in about 30 seconds. Just swept into action, got it done while we sat there kind of chuckling about random things. He carried that attitude into the interviews, he carried that attitude into the fight. We were kind of a banana skin for him in a way, and it was like genuine professionalism that helped get him through it. And even then, he didn't bail for the pit and go for the easy win. He put on a good show.
Yeah, this is the thing that I sort of really appreciated straight afterwards as well, was that, like, my concern was that he'd go for the pit, like, as soon as it was available, like, after 30 seconds, and then just pit us immediately, and that would be a bit boring for us. And yeah, I think giving it a proper fight, giving everyone a chance to show what their robots can do was really great as well. It was a really wonderful first, because this was our first, well, this was Hello There's first ever fight, my first experience sort of driving a Beetleweight in any form of fight ever. It was, I don't know, yeah, it was a really great first fight.
I'm happy to class this as our first fight. We've messed around with Split Decision, but it's not the same. It's a one-on-one, there's something at stake. And I think our nerves going into it definitely spoke to that. How were you feeling going in? Because all I remember is standing there. By the way, I remember us standing on the left. Don't know why that is. I've got the whole thing mirrored in my head. Fallibility of memory. All I remember, though, is standing there with the lights going down and the audio cues starting, not being able to feel most of my body.
Yeah, so I don't know if you ever experience this, but like sometimes I feel like if I guess it's not quite hyperventilating, but breathing a bit too much, and then, I don't know, my fingers and stuff go numb and tingly and stuff. It's weird. I definitely felt that, like I was sort of very nervous and excited about the fight going in. Yeah. Good stuff.
We haven't really spoken about Thunderchild yet. I think we'll save that for its next fight, because it deserves speaking about, and that fight deserves speaking about. But I think that's our true self-indulgence over with.
Yeah, have we blown enough smoke around yet?
Just about. We might get some more going later.
We'll come back.
Man, that is like 7 months worth of stuff to say that has just spewed out.
We should move on. The next fight was Annie, Are You Okay? Versus 2Berg, 2 Furious. And this interview answered a lot of questions that I had, I remember at the time. Like, throughout the day, being very confused about some of the things that were being said about, like, restraining orders and stuff. I was like, what on earth is going on? Like, there's so many in-jokes that I was missing out on. Didn't understand any of it. Because, like, later on in the day, when we were, like, around the tables for the melee thing and doing those interviews there with Sarah, and she was talking about the restraining order. I was like, what are you on about? Very confusing. So all my questions answered, and it all makes sense. And yeah, this was like they I think it shows how much thought is put into Bugglebots in the pre-production stage as well, like in terms of like while they're filming it and planning these little gags that run throughout it and stuff. There's a lot more to it than I was expecting.
There's a whole other layer to that as well, in terms of the kind of, I guess kayfabe is probably the right term for it with the 2Berg team, which is that they had pre-prepared a lot of material. I'm sure at some point you must have had a chance to actually look at the restraining order thing, because he put it up in a few places around the pits.
No, I never saw it.
Really?
Yeah.
It was written in the 3 worst possible fonts. I know Comic Sans was one.
Yeah.
Papyrus was the other, and I can't remember the name of the third. He put a lot of time and energy into making that as horrible as possible. But then the guys turned up on the Saturday, and they had a horrible Saturday morning. As I recall, they put the robot in the test arena, spun it up, and everything just broke. So they spent a long time getting that sorted out. They were also overweight, and they were just having to take a drill to every single part of their robot. They put hours of work in that morning to get through tech check and get into the competition.
Yeah.
And then after all of that, they're still able to go into that interview and put on their show. Incredible work from both of them. They were on the pit table behind us. I feel really bad. I don't know if it's an Aaron or an Aaron. I can't remember which one he prefers. I'm going to go with Aaron and Charlie. Both great laughs in the pits. And guys that really know their stuff with the robot as well. I think people looked at the original Berg and it had a lot of difficulties. You know, they weren't really running invertible. The drum wasn't getting much bite. It was running fast, but it wasn't getting much bite. This version is a really refined second version. It is a very good little robot, and we learned that later on. And I think it's easy to overlook what they've built because of their personas. But they are here to compete, not just to entertain an interview. Yeah.
I still just can't get over their morning and stuff. Like I spent the whole weekend working on that robot. And yeah, like you said, them being able to be entertainers as well. I mean, I don't know, very, very impressive, very cool. And yeah, very lovely chaps as well.
And then if we're going to talk about difficult journeys, we should also talk about the guy that took the longest flight in the world, literally, to be here.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing for everyone to understand is that Ben had the best biscuits. They were some weird Australian minty things, and they're one of the best things I've ever eaten, and I want many, many more of them. Screw the robot. Biscuits are important.
Oh dear. Ben was also responsible for the little smiley face that we had on the front of our robot as well.
Yes, of course. The doll's eyes that he uses on Annie are even more horrifying in the flesh.
God, that is a creepy robot when it wants to be.
It's also a very effective little machine. We sort of spoke about the Rev 4 style of undercutter. This is kind of the more stable cousin of Rev 4 with the sort of outriggers on the front. It probably makes the weight balance a bit weird, but it's a very, very neat way of doing the undercutter, and it worked incredibly well in this fight.
Mm.
Ben himself is also just great on camera, and It's the sort of YouTuber thing of he can talk about that robot all day. And if you want someone to be able to go into an interview with the Berg team and respond to them, he was pretty much the perfect person. His interview after the fight, particularly, is gold. Thanks to the Berg for being a robot I can beat is one of the lines of the series.
Yeah, he's very, very funny, very chill. And I love it as well that he sort of like was right in the beginning, the first, in that first interview, being like, I'm gonna win the fight, and then I've got to start fighting all the fake news. Like knew what was coming. You can definitely just to talk about ourselves a little bit more. You can tell that. Well, I don't know. Like he's much more comfortable on camera than we are. Like if you like the first interview when we're both like there in front of the green screen stuff, like it's just both so wooden and so awkward. Whereas Ben is not.
Green screen was a harrowing experience. We were prepared for interviews. We were not mentally prepared for green screen. If we're back there next year, we will be prepared for that.
Prepared for everything.
Do you remember the conversation that went on in the pits just before we all went to the arena? Between Ben and the Berg team?
No.
The pact. A pact was made, a deal was done in the pits between the two teams, where they kind of agreed to start the fight by just sitting back, both spinning up, and trying to create one hell of an impact when they came together. I'm not sure if it actually happened in the end, because we didn't get to see this one live. Our fight was the first one in the 3, and then we had to sort of go back to the pits. I'm like trying to tell if this was them doing that or not. I think Ben may have maybe jumped the gun a little bit and wasn't quite up to speed when he went in. In the absence of that sort of explosive first hit, what we got instead was a really calm, controlled performance from Annie, where it basically undercutted the way an undercutter should.
I mean, it did exactly what it was designed to do. It made short work of two Berg's wheels, and that was the end of it, really. It was a masterclass in undercutter technology.
I think it shows it's kind of from a different school of undercutter than Rev 4. Rev 4, I think, is trying to store and deliver as much energy as possible. Whereas Annie, I don't think, has as much weight in the weapon. I think it's about 300 grams on the weapon. And it's more about being able to get to those low spots.
Mm.
When Rev 4 goes in and hits something, everything just flies away. Whereas with Annie, especially with those outriggers, it goes in and can just go in slowly, doesn't need to engage too much. And yeah, I'm talking in circles again. It just gets in with control and takes the soft stuff.
Yeah.
Rev 4 wants to explode your whole robot. I feel like I fixated on Rev 4 just because we spoke about it last time.
That's fine. What did you think of the hologram technology that was used in this fight then?
Having not seen the fight live, I can't really comment on how realistic it was, but I do know that a large proportion of the non-existent budget went into it. In fact, that would explain... you know what? So, behind-the-scenes stuff here. It's a sort of big lecture theatre, and if you look towards the rear left, there's a guy, I think it was Chris, with a big switchboard that apparently controls all the lights. Now, I know he put a lot of work into getting the lighting perfect, but there were definitely more switches than lights. And those switches had to be doing something. And he always looks very busy back there. He's like stood up like he's almost DJing, moving stuff around constantly. I reckon he's dialing in the levels on those emitters.
Doing some work. Now, potentially mild spoilers for a Spider-Man film, but I reckon if you combine the two guys from 2 Berg, if you combine them into one person, I think they do look a little bit like Mysterio. And that will make people who know the film I'm referencing laugh, and it will make you go, yes. But trust me, that's funny, because I honestly put them together, Mysterio, and yeah.
I'll take your word for it.
I'm going to leave a moment here for the audience to finish laughing.
Pause for effect, and continue. And with this fight, we are set up on a date with Destiny, as we must now tangle with 2 Berg and Clause 2 in our 3-way.
Oh my goodness me.
And I want to immediately express a regret about this fight, which is that I think in our preparation for it, we ignored Clause 2 and that was a big mistake.
What would you have done differently?
We put the wedge on,
Yeah.
not because we wanted to beat Tuberg, but because we wanted to get yeeted by Tuberg.
Yeah.
We wanted to be able to run face first into them, and something spectacular would happen either way. And I'm fine with that rationale. I think if we went into this fight competitively, we should have at least considered the forks. Because Clause 2 against us with the wedge was always going to get under us. And when you look at how the fight actually went, every genuinely bad thing that happens to us happens because Clause 2 has got control of us. Maybe that was inevitable. Maybe our forks wouldn't have done anything against them anyway, but if nothing else, the 2 times they get a good grab on us, they're grabbing right behind the wedge. It's a perfect grip both times, and that grabber is super effective.
Yeah.
It looks kind of flimsy, but it's got the strength in the right places. And it gets a really good hold of you.
I have no regrets at all about what we did in this fight. I think we went in with the right configuration. I think that a sort of more thoughtfully designed wedge would have been better, maybe. But like, I think even if we went in with the forks, I think the grippers on Claws 2 would have grabbed something. There are holes in the top of the robot. There's lots of places for them to get in there and grab us. And I think Felicity's a better driver than me as well. So like, I don't think it would have made much difference if we'd gone with the forks. And I think having the big meaty wedge on the front was worth it just for being chucked around. I think that was funny.
I suppose if nothing else, we have ended up, well, not we have ended up, it's the opposite way around, but this is pretty much a carbon copy of our opening round at Marlow. It's us versus a drum and a wedge, or forks in this case, where we go after the drum because we think it's funny. We go through 5 or 6 backflips, and then the hammer dies. And the only difference between the 2 fights is that when we nearly get flipped in the exact same corner of the arena, we happen to land on our wheels in one and not in the other. Apart from that, the fights are going pretty much exactly the same way for us.
I think one difference is that in this fight, I went straight for Tuberg without any hesitation at all.
This is where we start a little segment I like to call responding to the commentary. In the first fight, it was quite rightly questioned whether we would be as aggressive if we weren't up against a wedge and were up against a spinner instead. I think this fight answered that question handily.
I should hope so.
There was no doubt in our mind before the fight that was the first move.
I'm really pleased with the way that it worked. I mean, so like, I don't think I drove very well in this fight in general, but I think the opening, like 5 or 10 seconds, I'm pleased with what happened. Like, I managed to turn and then drive in a straight line straight at Tuberg flawlessly. And I know that I'm like congratulating myself for this, but I am genuinely really pleased with how that went, and then got sent flying just as desired. I thought it was very funny and probably the best bit of driving I've done.
We had a plan and you executed it perfectly.
After that, I think my driving was atrocious, but that's the way it goes. Well, it was atrocious after I think we lost the belt. I think that really changes the way it drives. It changes a lot about the balance of things, and I didn't do very well, I don't think.
Yeah, so going into this, we knew that our exposed wheels were going to cost us at some point. And this was where that happened. I don't think it's losing the belt that's the issue. So what happened with that hit? It's the least spectacular hit of the fight, but it's the one that affects us the most. So Clause 2 has got a really good grab of the front of us. And Tuberg very calmly goes around and takes that back left. On video, it doesn't even look like a hit. You might see the drive belt go flying and that's about it. But that hit removes the drive belt and bends the axle up, so that wheel is now kind of semi-pinned. That's not the problem, though. The problem is that now the 4 wheels don't all touch the ground at once. And you can see at quite a lot of points in this fight, when you drive, the robot is rocking on the front left and the back right. So you, all of a sudden, when you're trying to drive in a straight line, are going from equal grip on both sides to more grip on the right. And I think the time that really shows is where you almost get stuck on the sidewall. Because you're going along perfectly happily and it veers left. So I think you're doing about as well as you could as an inexperienced driver with a robot that is suddenly not driving how you expect it to.
I think you're very kind, but yeah, I don't feel like I did a good job.
You're going to be your own biggest critic. I'm exactly the same.
Yeah.
And that's something that I didn't even realise that until I watched the footage. I think it's a subtle thing that I believe made a big difference. But you don't have to agree with that. You don't have to go with that. That's just my feeling on it.
Definitely harder to drive in this fight than the first one. Definitely.
And even after that, we still get to land some big hits. I love that moment where we're kind of on the sidewall with Clause 2 and you're just shouting to be hit, basically. It's like, yes, 2v1, do it.
I was really excited because I think Tuberg was coming up behind us. It's like I can hit one robot with the forward swing and another robot with the back swing. This is great.
Yeah, actually, I don't think you would have been able to hit with the backswing at that point. Because that first hit from Tuberg, when we land on the hammer and it's then bent off to the side. Which is where the trouble really begins for us. Because it's then not seating back properly in the weapon lock. And I think that is why the weapon axle started working loose. Because everything's being kind of tweaked round, and because the weapon axle is a nail that we didn't secure in at all. Probably also a factor. I think that's why it's working loose. And you can see, in the show notes, I'll put a still. You can see really well, when we are on the sidewall with Clause 2, that it's already worked about halfway out.
Mm.
So I think by that point, rather than the nail going through one bulkhead, through the weapon and through the other bulkhead, at that point I think it's just one bulkhead and weapon. Which is why when we get flipped, you very nearly self-right while we're still on top of Tuberg. But by the time we're flat on the floor, I think the weapon axle is halfway out at that point, and all of the pull on the pulley, rather than bringing the hammer over, is just trying to pull the hammer backwards instead, and that's why it's not coming back over. Because we can self-right from that position. It took us weeks of effort, but we finally got it self-righting from that position. Just as long as the hammer is actually attached.
Yeah, we have video evidence of this happening, so...
You can bet your bottom dollar it'll be in the show notes.
Yeah, it can do it. It struggles, but it can definitely do it. And yeah, we couldn't self-right because the weapon wasn't attached anymore. You can see the robot twitching and stuff, but yeah, with the weapon not attached, we don't stand a chance. It's not that the robot is bad; it's that the robot was broken.
The robot is also bad. But they're unrelated.
That's not why it failed to self-right, though.
I can completely understand in the commentary why they thought it was just a lack of power, because you can see it twitching try to do it. It makes complete sense that without the quite complex context of all of that, I too would look at that and assume it couldn't do it. At the time, we didn't realise what had happened, and we thought the servo had just started crapping out.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think the cameras missed what was one of the highlights of my weekend, which came after the fight, as I think, were just milling around waiting for the interviews to begin. All the cameras were repositioning, the lights were repositioning. And we just kind of heard the audience start laughing. And we turned around, and all we could see was Shane sat in the arena with our robot in his hand, just dangling it from the hammer.
Oh, dear.
Which actually was a massive pain in the backside for me when I came to fix the weapon, because it was all tangled up.
Yeah. There's so much wrong with that weapon. So much.
It's flawed, but we love it for its flaws.
Yeah. So after this fight, we did then glue the nail in place.
We came out with a surprising amount of work to do, really. Bending the axle back on the drive was a fairly complex task, because we had to get it back properly straight or everything drove badly.
Mm.
Reattaching the weapon was a bit of an ordeal, because I refused to just cut the lines and start again. Because as people who've watched the assembly video will know, that took 40 minutes of both of us working on it to get that done the first time. I didn't want to go through it again. So I just kind of origamied everything back in, and I'm not sure I really got it right. The wedge itself was fine, but the bolts holding it on were completely S-shaped.
Yeah, they were knackered. That was quite funny.
Those hits from Tuberg, I mean, when you... I was going to say when you hit the ceiling. I'm no longer convinced we did. We were damn close.
We were close, but didn't hit it.
I think the hammer might have tapped. I started the ceiling count just so we could be part of it. I don't want to lose this.
We're not part of it, mate. Like, we did not hit the ceiling. Next time we will. Next time it will happen, but this time didn't.
Tuberg, raise your game. No, those hits those 3 sort of big hits to the front completely opened up the holes that mounted the wedge, completely bent up the bolts. There is some very, very real power in that weapon.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And then, of course, we're talking about this as if the fight is over. A lot more happened once we were out.
Yeah, so Claws 2 and 2 Berg keep going. And it's oh man, that was a tense and exciting fight in the moment, and it was a tense and exciting fight in the edit as well. It was all the stuff around the pit. Ooh.
2 Berg has very impressive drive. I believe it's brushless. Although I've got history with this now. And we don't often get to see the speed it has. But once the drum is down and they're no longer being careful with the driving, there are moments in this fight where they kind of teleport a bit. And that, in the end, I think was their downfall. The drive must be very squirrely, and that's how they've managed to spin themselves into the pit. Felicity, on the other hand, on the edge of the pit, not worried at all, staying calm, just keeping out of trouble, and that pays off. I wonder if Felicity's heart rate has ever actually gone up during a fight. She always seems so incredibly chilled.
I have no idea.
Chris is back there living it, and she's just cool, calm, collected. Incredible.
Chris is there watching, thinking, I've got to repair this.
Hey, at least at this tournament, he only had 1 robot to repair. This is luxury to him.
I think I'd be calm in the fight if I didn't have to repair the damage I was doing to the robot.
I mean, I'm in the enviable position of just telling you to get it more broken. That's all I have to do. All of this means another spinner in the dung beetle in the shape of 2 Berg.
Yep.
It also means there's a nice silly pink hammer in there. What more could you possibly want?
Oh, man. A more functioning pink hammer. Can I just talk about ourselves briefly again?
It's our fight, do it. There's no one else in it.
I think I said this in the interview as well, but like aside from the hammer, the robot held up quite well. Like if you ignore the terrible design of weapon that we have, like the robust box with 4-wheel drive that we built did quite well. I think, you know, if we do next time we do this, we'll do a different way of doing 4-wheel drive that's a bit more robust. But I'm really pleased with the way everything held up. I think if we weren't upside down, we would have been able to, obviously, we would have to keep going. Like there was nothing wrong with nothing wrong. It was still drivable and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I'm once again, I'm pleased with this fight and the way that our robot performed.
I'm incredibly proud of our performance in this heat. I know that'll be weird for some people to hear, this idea of being proud of losing fights, but we went in knowing that we were one of the weaker robots there. There were matchups that if they happened, we felt we could win, but we are a new team with a new robot. We went on a massive journey of learning in doing this. There are so many things we would do differently if we rebuilt it, but what we produced held up. It was up to the task of putting on some good fights. We could very easily have gone along, had the wheels fall off inside 30 seconds and disappointed everyone.
This is the crucial thing, is like there are several ways to lose, and I think that we lost in the best possible ways. I think we lost after putting on a good fight, and we did not lose in those ways that we feared that we would. We didn't lose because the link fell out. We didn't lose because the wheels fell off. We didn't lose because we didn't have enough power to self-right. Like we lost because we were pitted or because our weapon was destroyed. Like, admittedly, the weapon one's a bit more our fault because we didn't glue the axle in. But like, you know, they were losses to be proud of in many ways. I think, for us anyway, for us, first timers.
I am disappointed with the way we went out, because it was a good fight that I would have liked to have been in for longer.
Yeah.
But we, as rookies, made a rookie mistake. So I'm not going to beat myself up about that. If I could change it, I would. But everything that we did there, I remain proud of. And I will be rewatching this episode for a very long time.
Right then, so next up we have Thunderchild versus Daedalus. One of the most anticipated fights, I think, of the day.
I think it's a real shame that so many Bugglebots viewers, after we went out, would have switched off in disgust and missed this fight. They really should have stuck around, because it's sensational.
Oh my goodness me, yeah.
I've said this in a number of places already, but this could have been the series final. And it would have been a worthy series final. To get this in a heat, we are being spoiled. I promised earlier that we'd catch up and talk about Thunderchild for a minute. So we should do that.
Do it.
No, you've got to do it now.
I've got to do it now. Thunderchild is really how right. So Thunderchild is really nice because it's proper 4-wheel drive and it's like amazingly compact and got all these different like really well designed and well thought out attachments that can go on the front with obviously the big wedge thing and the various types of forks and stuff. I think it's a wonderful little robot.
Thunderchild is probably the purest distillation of a wedge. We looked at Captain Doom last time and went, this is the prime wedge. No, Thunderchild is the prime wedge.
How much of Thunderchild is a kit, if any?
So Thunderchild originates from the old Trilobite kit, which have now been discontinued. Nate has been running it for years. I want to say 5 or 6 years. So whilst it started out as a kit, I think it's kind of Ship of Theseus its way into being Thunderchild. Everything's been swapped or changed at some point.
Yeah.
It's maintained the overall look and style because it's a good design.
Yeah.
But Nate has done a lot of work on it. I know he's also sort of worked up some of his own attachments as well. And what he's made is an absolute beast. I was saying earlier that he's at one with this robot. And that's true in terms of driving, but almost more impressive is his work in the pits. He can do anything to that robot in about 5 minutes. You blink and there's a different front end on it. It's so clear that he's gone through years and years of live events where he's up against a time pressure to get it repaired or get it changed.
This is another one of those like really sort of amusing, to me at least, differences in experience of what's going on, where like I think the 2 events that we've gone to with this, we've gone somewhere and then just kind of like spewed out over way more space than we've been given with all the ridiculous amount of stuff that we've bought because we don't know what we're doing. And then, you know, Nate's there, very neat, knows what's going on, got the space he knows he needs, and you know, like you said, can sort of make the modifications to his robot very quickly and with great skill.
You also have to remember that Nate obviously has travelled from America, so he's only been able to bring a very limited set of tools.
Yeah.
I'm fairly sure that he can maintain that robot with a pair of pliers, a screwdriver, and a hex key. That's it. He could probably do without one of those.
Yeah. One day we'll get there, Ryan. One day.
The main thing I feel about Thunderchild is that anyone who hates wedges will struggle to hate Thunderchild. Especially in this heat where it's come up against 3 very different opponents and put on a good fight every time. We so often say, oh, wedges are only entertaining when there's a spinner in the arena. In this case, they're extra entertaining, but the baseline entertainment value of a Thunderchild fight is very high.
Yeah, I still think that wedges of like the entertainment of wedges is still very dependent on the opponent in a way that other designs aren't. I can sort of still definitely sort of see where people are coming from with dislike of wedgie robots.
Oh yeah, I think it's still valid. It's just that Nate puts on a good show.
Yeah.
If nothing else, you get the raw brutality of someone being driven into a wall repeatedly, and we've already gone through how much we both love that.
Yeah.
Seeing him drive with a pistol grip also really makes me want one. And I suppose a robot that will work with one. That's the issue there.
Well, you're welcome to do it. I'm quite happy with the 2 sticks that we have.
Just having that ability to drive in a perfectly straight line really easily is so appealing.
Oh, I can already drive in a perfectly straight line.
I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about me. I just thought, split decision with a pistol grip. Probably not going to work.
No, that still won't go in a straight line.
Anyway, we're making this about us again.
That's not like us. We've never done that.
I know we don't thrive on purely talking about a fight, but this fight.
This was incredible, because we watched this one, or I certainly did anyway, watched it live, and it was very exciting then. And I'm afraid to say that it was still really exciting watching it.
I think it's even better filmed.
Yeah, well, because you can obviously just see the details and stuff and see just how damn close Daedalus was to going into the pit on numerous occasions.
Yeah, we were very near the back for this, and we couldn't really see the arena all that well.
Mm.
And when Daedalus is just cannonballing everywhere, you haven't really got a clue what's going on. You just know that it's really cool. The one thing that we'll never come across, and it was referenced in the interview, is the noise.
Mm.
Those are some massive impacts.
Yeah, horrible loud clangs.
Oh yeah, it's an unpleasant sound as well, not just a loud sound.
I am kind of glad that gets toned down in the recording.
Oh yeah, I've watched some live event streams where the microphone is in the arena.
Oh.
And arenas are echoey places. It's not pleasant. What must Cosmin have thought when he turned up to the event, went through tech check, finally saw the Heat lineup and saw Thunderchild in it? The one robot perfectly designed to beat him in his heat.
I don't know. If he's got any sense, he should have looked forward to it, you know? Be exciting. Be a good challenge.
To be the best, you've got to beat the best.
Exactly.
I can't really remember if we had an opinion on how this fight would go. But I think for most people viewing it, they were probably expecting this result. But that could just be my bias of having already known how it went. I wish I could see a poll of how people think this fight would go now.
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, I probably would have favoured Daedalus. I just think that, like, you know, I just would, because again, like, you know, as I confessed earlier, not too familiar with Nate or Thunderchild, so like I wasn't particularly aware, I think, at the time of what a tank Thunderchild is. So I would probably have given it to Daedalus just because I would have thought, well, Thunderchild will deflect a couple of hits and it'll, you know, tank 5 or 6 maybe, but then, you know, it will have received damage to the drive or something that makes it a bit more vulnerable, and then Daedalus can go and finish it off. But obviously that never happened. Partly because Thunderchild's a tank, and partly because Nate doesn't let it happen. He's very good at keeping the right part of the robot pointed at the opponent.
I think the key thing for me is that this is already Thunderchild's bread and butter as a fight. It's winning these fights in arenas without a sort of ring-out zone and without a pit. So once you put those into play, I think it really does swing in his favour. But as you say, we saw it earlier, one good hit from Daedalus is all it would need.
Like, I do think that if Daedalus got round the side and got like that same kind of like really good contact on the side of Thunderchild, I think that would have... I can't say if that would have like finished Thunderchild, but I think it would have seriously hampered it.
Daedalus did seem to get a couple of hits sort of over the wedge. The right-hand side of Thunderchild was starting to peel off. There were some chunks out of the right-hand tyre. But that was about it. The real danger for Thunderchild was when it was inverted. Because then you've got bite points on that wedge that could potentially rip it off.
Yeah.
Instead, it's just acted as a bite point for Daedalus to throw itself in the air.
I don't understand how Thunderchild wasn't thrown around in those moments.
So I don't believe he's running any magnets. I'm sure he'll correct us if I'm wrong. But as far as I'm aware, it is just the wheels, and that is it.
Yeah. Physics, man. Physics.
Physics, baby. Did you do any crowd watching after that hit?
No.
I implore you and everybody to go back to the footage of that fight just after Daedalus is put out and watch Greg from Wee Woo's reaction. Most people are kind of screaming and clapping. He's just flapping his arms around. He doesn't know what to do.
Aww.
I love how animated lots of builders get, but Greg especially, he lives it.
Deary me.
It's an easy fight to run out of steam talking about because it is just an epic.
Yeah, great fight to watch, difficult fight to talk about. So I think we should move on. And we have Clause 2 versus Annie, Are You Okay?
Oh no, I forgot this was coming up. Oh no. Oh no, it's going to take so long.
So here we are, an hour and a half into our recording, and we still haven't talked about this yet. Once again, I will just say that the repair job on Clause 2 is amazing. I think Chris does great work maintaining that.
It's a return to the wedge configuration, which is looking very neat considering it was Daedalus.
I will say, though, that I think both robots are limping a little bit by this fight. I think both Claus and Annie, Are You Okay? are not at 100%. I'd say they're both, 80 to 90%.
Ben has put out a really good video, not long before we recorded this actually, where he goes through all the damage to Annie. And what he was saying in that, obviously go watch it, don't just listen to my crappy summary. What he was saying in that is that he was having issues with the belt rubbing on some of his armour, which was one of the contributing factors to the weapon trouble he was having. That and some belt slip wearing the belt down, that's why the weapon died. Which is a huge shame because it was a really enthralling matchup with the weapon in play. And then it turned into more of kind of a chess match once it wasn't.
Yeah, so on like the belt stuff, I think Robert Cowan did a really interesting video because I didn't really understand sort of some of the complexities of doing belt-driven weapons. But he made a video and he was using these like plastic 3D printed pulleys and melting them by just spinning the weapon up. And I think that like nothing was particularly rubbing or anything. I think it was just sort of like the friction, I guess, or whatever of just the weapon spinning that fast and how quickly the belt's moving around and I guess possibly some slippage. I'm really not sure, but like the pulleys in his first, what was that for his ridiculous tomb clone thing with the insane thing like that the way that sort of could melt the pulleys and stuff, and he switched out for aluminium ones or maybe a different more tough plastic, I forget what it was, but like I don't know, I think that's a really interesting video just to sort of demonstrate some of the problems that you can face with these belt-driven spinners, and I guess it was issues similar to that Ben was facing with Annie, Are You Okay?
My understanding is that particularly with the higher MOI disc on there, he had to be quite careful with the throttle on the weapon, because otherwise he was using... So it's a timing belt, I think, or some kind of toothed belt. On the weapon side, he has a toothed pulley. Sorry, on the motor side, he has a toothed pulley. And on the weapon side, he has a smooth pulley, which means that it's relying purely on friction to get it spun up, but when it does hit, it can slip and therefore not transmit too much of the shock back through the pulley into the motor. And any time you're too aggressive with it and it starts slipping on that front pulley, that's going to wear down the teeth. And as those teeth wear down, which they're going to do quite easily because there's not much material at the very tip, the more they wear down, the looser the system becomes, the more likely it becomes to slip. As it slips, it wears down more, and it's just a vicious cycle from there. So that's my understanding of what the problem was. He gives a far better description with all the pieces in his hands on the video. But either way, the upshot is that he has no weapon for this fight. And he finds himself in a pushing match with a pusher. I was surprised by how evenly matched they were in terms of drive. Yeah,
by the time Annie's weapon, or after it had died, this is what I mean when I think both robots are limping, because I sort of think that at this point it should have been Claus pretty easily, really. But yeah, a lot more even than any of us expected, and I guess that Annie's just got more drive power than we thought as well. It's not just a weakness in Claus here. It's a combination of the two, I think.
Yeah, Annie is a lot more than just a platform to deliver a weapon to an opponent. I think the two robots are using very similar drive motors. I think Claus 2 is running the kind of standard, old, faithful, reliable drive motors that we also use. And with it being just two-wheel drive, there's a limit to how much of that it can then put into the floor as well. Claus 2 tends to control other robots by getting a good grab and getting their wheels off the floor with the wedge. Whereas against Annie, that's quite difficult to do because Annie's wheels are right at the back of the robot. Anytime they get under the front, Annie still has the traction to push back. The one time they get under the back, they're able to push it really well and nearly get it pitted. So I don't think it's necessarily a lack of power from Claus 2. It's just it not being able to get the grab it needs to really use that power. The crux of it, of course, is that it goes to the judges. For the most part, I think we've seen that so far Bugglebots has a very good audience who don't get too angry about decisions. And I'm very glad about that, because this is another tough one to call. We had Gear Down versus Snappy, that was tough. This is up there. Probably not quite as 50-50, but very close.
I remember at the time feeling like Ben was robbed here. I don't feel quite that strongly, but I still feel that Annie won that fight for me.
I'm the same. If I'm a judge, then I'm giving it to Annie. But at the same time, I'm not a judge, and I feel that they're looking for things that I'm not that make Clause 2 the winner. I still don't fully understand what the judges were looking for, but I think whatever they were looking for, they looked for consistently.
Yeah. I think it's a big shame that there was not a clip of the judges justifying themselves, you know? I think that would have been really nice here.
So there's a whole story there, isn't there? This fight happened one of, if not the last fight on the Saturday. You can see in the pits people packing up and leaving. And the day had overrun quite badly. Not badly, but it had overrun enough that it was a problem. And as bad as this sounds, all of the builders had a dinner reservation they needed to get to. And the crew were part of that as well. So I think the decision was made that they needed to get things done and they didn't shoot that segment. As I recall, they did it the next morning.
Ooh.
I'm not 100% sure it happens, but there was certainly a lot of conversation about doing it the next morning while we were all having dinner. So I assume it happened, and either they felt that the fight on video doesn't look too controversial, or they felt that the explanation wasn't convincing, or it was purely a consideration to runtime. This is already the longest episode of the series. But for whatever reason, we didn't get that. I personally, while at the time I did think it was Annie's fight, and I was confused by the decision, I think seeing it in the episode, it is close enough for no one to be angry about it. So in that respect, I don't think we need the explanation. I think it's always worth having the explanation just to protect the judges a bit, but I think we're fine without it. I also want to make clear that some of my memory there might be slightly off of what actually happened. It's all a bit hazy. I made notes when I got back, but a lot of stuff happened. I may have got some small details wrong. Anyone with corrections, please give them. Feel free to set the record straight.
See if we can make it a recurring thing of Ryan correcting himself at the beginning of every episode.
That ship has sailed, my friend. One thing that I've seen a lot of people saying is they're surprised it was unanimous, and that statement still confuses me.
I think it depends how you think the judging works. If you think that it's based on opinion, then I also would be surprised if it were unanimous in a fight like this. But I think you probably made this point a long time ago on Spinnerproof. Like if all the judges are sort of following the same rules and judging by the same criteria, you would expect that they would all agree on the result.
Yeah. And just because they all agree doesn't mean they don't all think it was very close.
Yeah. Yeah, you can have a close fight and have a unanimous decision. It's like, people I think misconstrue, is that the word I'm looking for? I don't know, but they sort of like equate a split decision with a close fight, which isn't necessarily true.
Yeah. I'm about to do some maths here. But I believe if you had 3 judges who could not make a decision and they all flipped a coin, the odds of them all getting the same would be what, 1 in 4?
I don't know.
So even if you do take a split decision being a sign of closeness, 1 in 4 would still come out unanimous.
If you say so. I'm going to make it very clear that I am not committing to Ryan's understanding of how probability works. I am going to say right now, I've forgotten everything I ever knew about probability, so I don't know.
I haven't accounted for a coin landing on its side.
This is Ryan's view of the world, not mine.
Math.
Ryan's views expressed in this episode are his and his alone, and do not necessarily represent the views of me or Spinnerproof.
I'm going to express a view you will agree with. It is very exciting to have 2 spinners thrown into the 10-way. Especially with one of them being Daedalus, let's be honest.
Oh god, it's sort of insane that Daedalus is in the 10-way. That's mad.
Clearly, Bugglebots is rigged to make the 10-way as exciting as possible. Right then. Heat final. Probably not that much to say about this one. It's one for the purists.
Yeah.
It could have been over in 5 seconds and thankfully wasn't.
God, so yeah, when Clause 2 was stuck up on the forks like that, like Nate could have left them and that would have been a brutal way to lose.
Nate, thankfully, is better than that and keeps the fight going.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Now, far be it from me to criticise someone else's fork setup, but their fork setup did not help them here.
I'm so glad that we are not the only ones that made mistakes like that. I feel somewhat vindicated.
The difference is they've actually fixed their problem.
Well, we will fix it next time we build a robot. Like, it will be fixed, just not on Hello There.
We fixed it by retiring the robot.
Hello There will continue to be the flawed robot it's always been.
The one other thing I would say, if they wanted to keep this fork setup, the other thing that would make a lot of sense, and something that I didn't realise was an issue that Clause 2 had, is that the wheels aren't exposed on the rear.
Mm.
So they could very easily get hung up on a wall in a similar way, even if they were running the wedge.
Yeah. Rookie mistake.
Maybe if Chris can build another 5 or 6 robots, maybe he'll finally get the hang of it after that. Now, it's such a tough matchup for Clause 2.
Yeah.
You wouldn't completely sort of write them off in it, but it's difficult to see a reliable route to victory for them. While Thunderchild could easily struggle fork to fork, it's still got the grip and drive power, even just in the rear wheels, to match them. It's going to end in a pitting one way or the other, and it's probably going to be Thunderchild.
Yeah. Somewhat inevitable, I think.
But what you now have is a robot going into the 6-way that is very good in that environment.
Mm.
Last year, they were millimetres away from getting into the grand final, and it all ended on a pitting. This year, in the 3-way, they've kind of seen the other side of that coin. It's such fine margins for them, but you could see them getting through again.
Yeah, you never know.
And there endeth Heat 4.
Indeed. And so it ends.
I know you kind of said this at the front of the episode, but I want to reiterate it. I am so incredibly grateful to everyone involved for the welcome that we received and just the fun we had over the weekend. It was an incredible experience. We are very, very lucky that we got to have this as our first event. Still don't understand how we got selected, and I'm incredibly glad that we did. I hope that we validated that decision to have us there.
I hope so. I wonder how much of it was like the hope that we'd bring a rubbish robot that everyone could laugh at, seeing as we'd spent so long bashing other people's robots.
That's the other thing. We've said this quite a lot, but it has really changed the way certainly I think about the podcast and the way we talk about other people's robots. We have been fully braced for some quite negative comments about the robot. And the comment that I always dread, I haven't seen it yet, and hopefully I won't. The comment I always dread is, why did that get in when insert actually competitive robot didn't? That's the thing that always worries me, that sense that we are taking a place that could have gone to someone else. I don't think that is true. I think with Bugglebots, they always want a certain number of newcomers and more whimsical bots. I think if it wasn't us, it would be another similar robot.
Yeah, they want a good mix of competitive robots and joke robots.
It's your turn to poke the bear, I see.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah, there is always a pressure to perform.
Yeah.
And as I say, I think I'm genuinely confident that we lived up to expectations and kind of met the responsibilities we had.
Some might say that we take this too seriously.
Honestly, this is something I've said elsewhere in relation to some comments that you do get on things about, oh, what a bunch of nerds and all of that. It's like, if you look at us doing this, if you can watch our fights and hear us laughing all through it in the background and look down on people for that, what is going on? We're all out to have fun, and boy, did we do that.
Yeah.
I'm going to soapbox no more.
Good. One final thing. Can I say this? I might cut this out. Gareth made a video.
Yes.
Which is, honestly, my favourite thing to come out of this episode. If we can,
Link in the show notes. We'll probably tweet it at some point as well.
yeah. You just need to. Well, I'm not going to explain anything. You just need to watch it because it's really funny, and I'm so happy that someone did it.
Unfortunately, I think the edit that I wanted you to do isn't going to pan out. I don't think we quite have the right shot for it.
What did you want me to? Oh, yeah. I don't think we have the shot to do it. No.
Such a shame.
I'm sorry.
Outro!
You can find the show notes for this episode at spinnerproof.com/episodes/65. And there you can find links to all the stuff we've been talking about today. You can also find a link to our Twitter at Spinnerproof, where you can tweet to us what you got for Christmas if you celebrate Christmas.